Hello there, I'm Dr. Trish Varner. If you're new here, I post content related to discoveries, life, and inspiration with a heavy focus on ancestry and DNA stories. A couple of months ago, I received a request from a viewer to look into the rumor about Clark Gable passing for white. If you haven't seen that video, I will link it above in case you want to check it out. Since then, I've gotten several requests from viewers to research other individuals or topics. I think the name I've seen the most since posting the Clark Gable video is J. Edgar Hoover. Many of you commented about the rumor that J. Edgar Hoover passed for white. I have to admit, this isn't something that was at the top of my list because I'm not a fan of J. Edgar Hoover. But I do love my viewers, so yes, in this video, I'm going to be talking about that man, J. Edgar Hoover. Let's go back in time to do a little research. Hoover is probably best known as the director of the FBI and the many files he kept filled with secrets from high-profile individuals. It is well known that he relentlessly persecuted Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights leaders. Hoover believed in white supremacy, and he believed that black people should be kept in their place. Hoover only grew up with black people as servants who worked for his family. He thought they were beneath him, an idea that was confirmed by his mother, as she was often insensitive towards the family's black servants. Knowing how Hoover treated black people and how he persecuted black leaders, it would be very ironic if Hoover himself was a descendant of African American ancestry. Hoover was named John Edgar Hoover at birth. He was born January 1st, 1895 in Washington, D.C., and was the youngest of 4 children. His brother Dickerson and sister Lillian were several years older than Hoover when he was born. His sister Sadie died at the age of 3 before he was born. As the baby of the family, Hoover was doted on. He quickly became his mother's favorite. His father also cherished Edgar and would send him special letters when he was away on business. His father worked in a government job for 40 years. The family was stable and lived comfortably, and they even had servants to take care of them. Edgar lived a sheltered and privileged life. However, he was a shy boy and he did have a stutter. His mother tried to help build his confidence about that, but Edgar was still subjected to teasing, which became one of a few things that molded him into a ruthless director of the FBI. He didn't like to be made fun of. He didn't like people looking down on him or spreading rumors about him or his family. Hoover did whatever he could within his power to ensure his family's secrets stayed hidden, while he ironically used other people's secrets as a way to elevate his family and himself to a better position. That does not necessarily mean he had African American ancestry, but it certainly adds credits to why he would never admit it. Edgar's parents' names were Dickerson Naylor Hoover Sr. and Anna Maria Sheitlin. On paper, Edgar's father is noted as having English and German ancestry. His mother is noted as being of German-Swiss ancestry. Strangely, Edgar's parents never requested a birth certificate for him, although it was a requirement to file a birth certificate in 1895 in Washington, D.C. The question becomes, why didn't they file his birth certificate? Their other children had birth certificates filed at birth. Edgar's birth certificate was not filed until 1938, when he was 43 years old and needed it to pursue his government career. Of course, this opened the door for all types of rumors. Was Edgar really their biological son? Did his father, Dickerson Sr., have Edgar with another woman, perhaps a black woman that could have been a servant? Or did his mother, Anna, possibly have an affair with another man? We may never know for sure why they chose to not file his birth certificate. One thing we do know, though, is J. Edgar Hoover was a master at keeping secrets, and appearances were very important to him. He would protect his and his family's image at all costs. If he knew of any African American ancestry in his family, he would never tell it. What he did do, though, is spend countless dollars, time, and energy to try to discredit black civil rights leaders. So far, there are two holes in what we know about Hoover's identity. First, we know he hated people to be critical of him. He saw black Americans as lazy and inferior to white Americans. Considering this, he would most likely rather have died than be associated with a group he felt was beneath him and his family. Secondly, the fact that his family never filed a birth certificate for him leaves the door open for his real identity to be questioned. This means Hoover having African American ancestry cannot yet be ruled out. What else is out there, though, to support that rumor? Although the paper trail does not show for certain that Hoover had African American ancestry, some genealogists have not ruled out the possibility. Author Millie L. McGee said she was 10 years old when her grandfather told her the family secret. Her grandfather told her that J. Edgar Hoover was part of their family and he was passing for white. Millie spent over 20 years researching her family's history. She says she discovered that J. Edgar Hoover was her grandfather's first cousin. According to Millie, in one of her recorded interviews, Edgar was a product of an affair. Allegedly, Edgar's mother, Anna Marie, had an affair with Millie's great-uncle Ivy. According to her research, Edgar's real father, Ivy, was mulatto, and his mother, Anna Marie, was also mulatto. If this is true, that would have made J. Edgar Hoover mulatto as well. In case you're not familiar with the term mulatto, that is a term that isn't really used in today's times. However, back when this story was unfolding, it was a common term to define someone of African American ancestry and European ancestry. Since that is an official term that was used on documents back in the time frame that we are discussing, I will continue to reference it in this video. Millie's family was raised on a former slave plantation owned by a Hoover family in Pike County, Mississippi. These Hoovers, she claims, were related to the Hoovers in Washington, D.C. Genealogist George Ott also seemed to confirm at least part of Millie's story. According to Millie's family history, the story started with the union of a black enslaved woman and her white slave master. That relationship resulted in the birth of Elizabeth Allen in 1814. Elizabeth was taken from Mississippi by a man named William Hoover, and they moved to the Washington, D.C. area. According to Millie's family history, Elizabeth Allen, the black or mulatto enslaved woman from Mississippi, went on to have 7 children with William Hoover. One of their children, John T. Hoover, later had a son of his own, Dickerson N. Hoover, who was the father of J. Edgar. Millie McGee's grandfather, known as Big Daddy, was the grandson of Emily. According to Millie, Emily was John T. Hoover's sister. This is very interesting information, as it seems to explain why on one line of J. Edgar Hoover's family tree, there is an abrupt end on his father's side. The family tree has Edgar's paternal grandmother listed as Cecilia Jane Naylor, who was born in 1837. This would have been Edgar's father's mother. The tree also listed Cecilia Jane's parents as Dickerson Naylor, born in 1807, and Eleanor Lindsay, born in 1812. However, there is no formal records of their parents. Eleanor and Dickerson Naylor were Edgar's great-grandparents. This brings up a lot of questions. It is very possible that Eleanor and Dickerson were descendants of slaves. Remember, slaves during that time were listed as property and often were not referenced in documents by name. This is where it gets a little confusing though, because according to Millie, the story started with Edgar's paternal grandfather's line and not his paternal grandmother. His paternal grandmother, Cecilia, has the line that cannot be traced back beyond her parents though. However, in Millie's story, it was Edgar's paternal grandfather, John T. Hoover, who was the product of William Hoover and a black slave named Elizabeth. On J. Edgar Hoover's family tree, John Thomas Hoover's mother is listed as Elizabeth Ann Huff and not Elizabeth Allen. However, it is possible that it was the same person. Furthermore, Elizabeth most likely was mulatto, so some may have mistaken her for a white woman. Additionally, in the family tree I researched, there is no line beyond Elizabeth Ann Huff. However, there are several generations before William Hoover. This indicates to me that William Hoover had a well-documented family tree, and he was most likely of full European descent. Elizabeth Ann Huff, however, could have been the same Elizabeth that Millie said was brought from Mississippi as a slave. According to Millie's story, William Hoover and the allegedly enslaved woman Elizabeth also had a daughter together named Emily Allen. She was allegedly sent back to Mississippi to be a mistress for a different man named William Hoover. Emily Allen was Millie's great-grandmother. According to Millie's story, Emily Allen was John T. Hoover's sister. John T. Hoover was J. Edgar Hoover's grandfather. Emily Allen was Millie's grandfather's grandmother. This would have made Millie's grandfather and J. Edgar Hoover second cousins. However, Emily Allen is not listed on the public tree as one of William Hoover and Elizabeth Ann Huff's children. This does not necessarily mean anything though. Genealogist George Ott did find one record of the transfer of a slave named E. Allen from the D.C. area to Mississippi. However, there is no record as to how or why she was transferred to Mississippi. George Ott said, in his professional opinion as a genealogist, he does believe it is a chance that J. Edgar Hoover was part black. According to some other info I came across, Millie McGee said she also found records to prove that J. Edgar Hoover's grandfather and great-grandfather lived in a segregated black area of Washington, D.C., and were classified in a census as colored. If this is true, was J. Edgar Hoover aware of this history? We will get to that in just a moment. I did find some inconsistencies in Millie McGee's family history. For instance, she mentioned in an interview that her grandfather and J. Edgar Hoover were first cousins and not second cousins. However, when I tried to align her story to J. Edgar's public family tree, it seems a second cousin relationship would make more sense if there is a relationship at all. Also, there is no record of Emily Allen being William Hoover and Elizabeth Ann Huff or Elizabeth Allen's daughter. However, there was nothing to rule it out either. Lastly, in an interview clip I found, Millie talked about Edgar being a product of an affair that his mother, Anna Marie, had with a mulatto man named Ivy. However, during my research, I also found where Millie shared a story that led to Dickerson N. Hoover being J. Edgar's father, and that Dickerson was the son of John T. Hoover, who was mulatto. That story aligns with the names shown on the public family tree. If you're interested in hearing more from Millie to clear this up, leave a comment and let me know, and I will try to set up an interview with Millie. Millie said her family was terrified to discuss the truth about J. Edgar Hoover's ancestry, as they felt it would have put their lives in danger. Now, I really do believe that to be true. During my research, I discovered J. Edgar Hoover did a lot of shady things, including blackmail and allegedly destroying lives. It is not unreasonable at all to think he would have done whatever necessary to make sure his family's secrets stayed hidden. Hoover prided himself in his accomplishments and would never allow anything to jeopardize that, even if that meant taking extreme measures. According to Millie, a couple of her family members were allegedly murdered after they tried to bring the truth to the light. Here is a clip.
And I understand that you were threatened in your family as a child, that if you came out, what would happen?
My grandfather said when he told me, because, you know, when you tell children stuff like that, and J. Edgar Hoover's all over the television, and Dick Gregory and everybody is talking, and Martin Luther King, I was inquisitive. I wanted to go and tell my friends, oh, we are related to the FBI director. My grandfather said, look, daughter, you cannot tell that. If you do, our whole family would be burned as we slept. It was the most frightening thing for 10 years old to hear. And then he went on to tell me about 2 other murders that was done in the family, and it was J. Edgar Hoover's half-sister, who was 31 years old, had 5 children, and a husband. She was murdered. And his father, my Uncle Ivy, was 58 years old, and he was murdered, because they decided that at that time in life, he should have owned up to who he was. Have his inheritance, you know. And he felt like if I told now, I would be killed.
Would J. Edgar Hoover actually have gone to those extreme measures to hide his secrets? Let's dive a little more into his upbringing. If you believe the story that J. Edgar Hoover's father, Dickerson Naylor Hoover, was the son of 2 mulatto parents, then you might find this information about Dickerson very interesting. J. Edgar Hoover's father was a religious man. He felt it was important to teach his family about the Bible. Each of the kids were required to learn Bible scriptures. Dickerson raised them in the Lutheran Church. Edgar learned scriptures about hellfire and heathens and quickly associated that with the black race, whom he felt was inferior. It was something he certainly didn't want to be associated with his family. However, Edgar's father, Dickerson, had many mental struggles. He suffered from anxiety, which led to depression and eventually to delusions. He eventually had a complete breakdown and had to be committed to a sanitarium. He even received shock treatments for his illness. Could it be possible that Dickerson was aware of his mulatto background and perhaps found it difficult to deal with, having to hide his identity? Edgar and his mother Anna looked at this as a weakness in Dickerson. Besides struggling financially after Dickerson was fired from his government job due to his mental illness, the family also suffered through relentless rumors and criticism, something that Edgar despised. Edgar became ashamed of his father and refused to visit him. He was determined to not disappoint his mother like his father had, and he made it his life's mission to give her the type of life she always wanted. Hoover, who never married, stayed very close to his mother and lived with her until she died. He was ashamed of his father until his father's death. However, is it possible that Edgar exhibited the same anxiety and delusions that drove his father to a mental breakdown? Edgar did have some obsessions. He thought just about everything was a conspiracy. He was ruthless in his pursuits, even to the point of false accusations, forced confessions, beatings, illegal deportations, and harassment, allegedly. He also allegedly sanctioned poor treatment of immigrants. He led illegal searches, and he falsely accused many individuals of communism. Some people say he went to the extremes to show his patriotism to his country, but some other insiders felt he would stop at nothing to get what he wanted, even if that meant destroying lives. He was obsessed with civil rights leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He kept records on high-profile people with the intent of using it to try to blackmail them if needed, especially if they disagreed with him. He allegedly held everyone's secrets locked away for a time when he would need them for his own personal gain. Those who worked the closest to him said he was apparently anxious about no one knowing of his origins. Journalist Edward Spanis believed Hoover had something to hide. Spanis believed it may help explain Hoover's persecution of Black Americans. He didn't want to give anyone a reason to solidify the rumors about his ancestry, so he worked extra hard to prove he didn't have Black American ancestry at all. In the book Official and Confidential, a Black man that had worked for Hoover in a menial capacity said that he was sure that Hoover had some Black blood in his background and was terrified that it would come out. Having something to hide made him obsessive about the secrets of others, Carroll says. It was a self-hate syndrome played out against the people he hated. If you're Black and watching this, you may be able to relate. I know I have experienced individuals of African American descent in high-profile positions like this in my life. They could be in the office, at your children's school, the manager of a restaurant or retail store. They are the ones who go out of their way to prove they aren't giving any special favors to other Black people. And in doing so, their behavior becomes a form of discrimination against those who look like them and come from the same background as them. They typically are critical, judgmental, and even rude. You know immediately from encountering their presence that they are not on your side and will usually work against you. If they are the ones to make the hiring decision, they are not going to hire you. If they are an educator, they will do nothing to support Black students. If they are a politician, they will not advocate for Black causes. If they are on the police force, they are going to make sure to go after you harder than anyone else. If they are a judge, they will give you a harsher sentence. No matter how much they achieve, in actuality, they have a problem with themselves and do not really want to be associated with anything black. I'm referring specifically to self-hating black people in position of authority. Most professional people of African American descent I encounter are supportive of black issues, but then there are those like J. Edgar Hoover. For Hoover, though, could it have been more than fear of others finding out that he had Black American ancestry? Could he have actually had a longing to be a part of a community that embraced him? Dr. Gilo Kwesi Cornell Logan described meeting J. Edgar Hoover at the White House when he was just 4 years old. He said, quote, "I went to give him the black soul handshake, and he fumbled the handshake, and it was a funny moment, and I can only imagine it was a tense moment for my father, for my parents, but it was a little bit hilarious. So in terms of code switching, I'm 4 years old being taught how to code switch through shaking hands with J. Edgar Hoover." End quote. Was Hoover secretly jealous or envious of black leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was intelligent, influential, and well-liked in his community? There are so many things that Hoover did that may or may not be shocking to some. In this video, I'm just going to stick to his ancestry, but let's just sum up that other stuff to say he did way too much. I mean, way too much. He allegedly did a lot of dirt. Hoover was a loner. He did not have many friends. In fact, he really only had one friend that he hung out with regularly, and that friend was Clyde Anderson Tolson, who many believed was Hoover's romantic partner. They took trips together, went to clubs together, and Hoover even left all he had to Tolson. Tolson allegedly moved into Hoover's home after he died. I'll let you take from that what you will, since this is not a video about that. However, there were rumors that Hoover never wanted to marry and have children because he was afraid they might come out looking black. But alternatively, if he did have a secret relationship with Tolson, that could also be a reason Hoover never married or had children. Hoover died alone on the floor of his home in 1972. 3 black people who worked for him reported his death. They had worked for him for years, but he never befriended them. He never talked to them about his past life or made any confessions about his ancestry. He died alone with his secrets and perhaps wondering if it was all worth it. So what do you think? Considering the information available, are you convinced that J. Edgar Hoover had Black American ancestry? Some of you might have seen my video about Clark Gable's supposed African American ancestry. If you did, you know that at the conclusion of the video, I leaned towards believing the paper trail. However, in this situation with J. Edgar Hoover, I must admit there is a very strong possibility that Hoover actually did have African American ancestry. We may never know for certain, but I'm leaning towards he did. I believe he did bad things and made many people's lives unnecessarily difficult, and he allegedly even ruined some lives. I really don't care if he had African American ancestry or not. However, I was asked about my thoughts on the rumor, and now I am sharing those thoughts. I do believe that J. Edgar Hoover most likely had some African American ancestry. I also believe he could very well have known about it. He was somewhat a complicated man. He verbally condemned things that he seemed to be involved in. For instance, he was known to be very homophobic, but some believe he was allegedly in a long-term relationship with Tosin. He said he believed in patriotism and the necessity of being tough on crime, but he allegedly participated in behavior that would not live up to that image. Likewise, there's a chance he knew about his family's African American ancestry, but still chose to heavily persecute Black Americans. If you found this video interesting, give it a thumbs up to help it get out to more people. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you would like to see more content like this. I look forward to reading your comments, so make sure you leave them. I'll see you in the next video.